What's up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back again, finally, to talk about Hytale. So I'm not going to be surprised if there's those of you watching this video that are like, what's Hytale? So I'll give you a quick recap. So Hytale is quite literally going to end up being Minecraft 2, but made by the Hypixel developers. They're basically just decided one day that they wanted to end up making their own game. And it ended up having a trailer that ended up just erupting and exploding and making, the internet basically got on fire with that video. And then we ended up running into some problems because the company ended up basically getting bought up by Riot Games, and suddenly all of the blog posts and everything like that became less and less frequent. The beta that we were promised years ago never ended up coming to be, and we just keep getting more and more delays related to a release date. However, they kind of go into a lot more detail within this blog post that I definitely appreciate, because it makes it feel like, oh, this is why they weren't talking about this, because they kind of had to keep this under wraps, probably because Riot Games is telling them, shh, you're not allowed to talk about it. But in short, what they basically had to do is the developers seem to have been forced into designing this game for a console market. And more specifically, the game is being designed for crossplay right out of the gate, which means that it's going to be on PC and consoles, and we'll all be able to play it together, right? Now, they also mentioned that they didn't really have a system in place for this, and so they kind of had to redesign the game from the ground up in order to accommodate for this. Having a game have crossplay designed into it is a lot more difficult than you guys might think, which is why it's very, very rare for a game that comes out without crossplay to eventually end up getting crossplay, unless it's really, really popular, like something like Warframe is getting it more recently. So them making the decision to have it right out of the gate, I think that was a good one. They also go into a little bit more detail of how they're really trying to make this game accessible for everybody. So they want it to be functional on low spec PCs as well as high spec. And then they kind of go into a little bit more detail of our vision for Hytale, which is basically going to end up being 3 different game modes right out of the gate. So there's going to end up being, they kind of show this in the form of doorways right here. So there's going to be creative mode, mini game mode, and then the open world RPG element. Now, there is also going to end up being a huge emphasis on modding, because they are making this game very, very accessible for modders to end up not only creating their own maps, but be able to create their own parameters and maybe even their own games. The biggest thing for me, though, was that they ended up showing off a little bit more of their creative tools. So let me actually show you this right here just very quickly. So they go into creative mode, right? And, they're just kind of building the standard house, and then they end up using a selection tool, which is very similar to the world edit mod on Minecraft. Obviously a little bit more extreme, which I think is awesome. That already is a huge, huge plus. They ended up kind of talking about this years ago, but they never ended up highlighting it as good as they do here. They also show that they have scripted brushes, which means that you can end up programming in what the brush is going to end up painting. And in this case, they're using it to quite literally just paint a bunch of wall blocks. And then they've also got a path painter as well. And look at this. You see that? It was smart enough so that they could end up painting a path, and then when it ended up interacting with the wall, it knew that it had to end up creating an entrance through the wall, which I just think is absolutely awesome. They also end up showing kind of a lava bucket tool, which basically is them painting in the environment. They're deleting blocks, throwing lava down at the bottom of it, but the game is smart enough to end up kind of cascading the hills into the crevice, instead of it just being something that you would end up chopping out a piece of the environment and then having to manually end up fixing it all yourself, which I think is really, really cool. And again, leaves a huge imagination of just what kind of dungeons we could expect. There will be a link in the description for you guys can check all this out. I just kind of wanted to skim through it and give you guys the basics of it all, rather than having like a 10-minute or 20-minute video talking about the exact same thing. And otherwise, smash like stuff for more. Buy the merch you want to support the channel. I patiently await Hytale, but I have no expectations of when it's going to come out.